So we're going to be talking about writing code. And for our users, this is, well, that's the only option that you have available. But SPSS users, particularly those who have been accustomed to using SPSS with the graphical user interface, um, find it difficult to make the translation, the transferal of their knowledge into writing code. Um, Most serious scientists don't do analysis just by setting up an analysis with a series of points and clicks. Usually they write programs like the one that I'm showing you here. It doesn't matter what this does, but this is what syntax looks like in SPSS. It's a program that you write to accomplish various things, whether it's data entry, data manipulation, data transformation, data management, as well as analysis. So eventually you're going to find that just using point and click dialog boxes for analysis is going to be a real limitation, and that limitation will catch up with you pretty quickly here, particularly in graduate school, because your graduate student colleagues, your collaborators, they're going to know how to do this, at least in some language, and maybe not in SPSS, but they're going to know about code, and so you're going to need to become familiar with how to talk to programs by writing programs, writing code or syntax. You're going to find it to be painful at first. You're gonna scream and kick at times and wonder, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to learn this? Why can't I just bring down this dialog box and move this variable into this box and click this button and say okay and just be done with it? There are many, many reasons why you should learn to write in code, to learn to use syntax. I'm just going to step through some of those. One of the reasons is that by writing syntax, it's going to force you to sit down in an organized way and think systematically about what you're trying to do with your data, how you're going to try to manage the data, how you're going to keep track of what columns are doing what you need to do to manipulate to create something that's going to be useful to you. By writing code, it's just like writing a book. The story just doesn't pop out. You've got to write it. You've got to think through what is the plot, what are the characters, how do I develop the characters over time, how does the story unfold. That's what writing a program is. So it forces you to sit down and be organized about your day-to-day empirical life and world. It's also a great way of documenting your thoughts and your analysis to both yourself and to others. You're going to be doing a lot of different kinds of analyses. You're going to be working with lots of data, and you're going to be working on multiple projects probably simultaneously, and it's easy to forget why you have done something the way you have done something when time has passed and you haven't been thinking about something recently. When you have a program or syntax or code right in front of you, once you become familiar with writing and therefore reading that code, it'll be a way that it'll end up being a sort of documentation for your thinking and your analysis. And others who know that language can read your code and also understand exactly how your code is working and what you were thinking about when you were setting up a particular data management or data problem. So it's a great way of documenting what you're doing. And that also helps collaboration with others, because you'll find that science is a collaborative effort. You're going to be needing to share your thoughts, your code with others, and it's really just a necessary part of collaboration. Furthermore, your collaborators are probably already going to know how to do this stuff. They're going to know how to write code, and so just to be able to work with people, you've got to know the language, know their languages. So if you come in and don't really understand how certain things are done, then that's going to slow down projects. So to be a good collaborator, you've got to be familiar with writing and code. Writing code also helps when you have problems. There are times in which you'll do an analysis and something won't look right. Something, maybe the sample size is 200 and yet you see in the output only 140 people are in the data. So what happened? What happened to the rest of them? If you're just doing the analysis, cutting, clicking and dragging, you have no way of knowing sort of where in the process did I lose those 60 cases. Whereas when you write the code, you can sort of run things line by line and figure out where are the problems occurring, and that can help you to troubleshoot and know what you might need to change to get an analysis to do as you intended, as opposed to just generate a lot of errors. It also makes reanalysis much easier. When you collect data, you often collect it in stages. So you might do a study and say, well, here are the 50 participants in the study, and so I'm going to do this analysis. And you might decide, well, there are things about the study that need to be changed. So I'm going to go ahead and change the study. Or maybe you'll say, you decide, well, I'm going to have to get more data. I'm just going to have to keep collecting data. If you have a program that does all the data transformation, data management, data analysis, you won't have to redo all the pointing and clicking that you did earlier on. You'll have a program that did it, and then you can just take the new data set, the data set that results after you've added 50 people to the study, or after you've changed the method. You can then bring in a new data set and replicate the kind of analysis that you were doing earlier because you have the program that did it. So having your code just makes it easier to do the same thing over and over again, and also it helps you to change things, to make minor changes to an analysis. Writing code is also required for some programs that you're going to need to use one day. Many data analysis programs have no other option available except writing programs, writing code. So you're going to have to become familiar with this, because when you go into certain areas of statistics, you're going to be doing certain kinds of analyses, and the software that does those analyses may only work with code. So it's just something you're going to have to do. You can't get away from it. It's something you're going to have to learn. And it's also a generalizable skill. So the point I'm making here is that once you learn how to think like a programmer, once you learn to write code, you will now have developed the thought process of a programmer. It'll become a lot easier then for you to go into another program and learn its language. You will have already sort of gotten over the difficulties of just thinking like a programmer, because you've already learned how to do it in some other language. So once you learn one language, it gets easier to learn the other. As if if you learn Spanish, then that if you already know Spanish, it's a little bit easier to learn Italian because there's some similarities there. No, not all. It's not true for all languages. Learning Spanish might not help you speak Dutch, for instance. It just depends on the similarities between different languages that you're using for particular analyses. Some languages are very different than others. Some features of programs aren't available through a graphical user interface. They are only accessible through code. And so by learning to write code, you will have more things available to you, because those things are only available to you by writing code, as opposed to through some kind of a point and click or drop down dialog box. You'll find that as you go in to more and more advanced classes and doing more and more complex analyses, that those classes and the software they use in those classes are probably going to be syntax or code-based languages. And so it's just, again, you can only get so far before your inability to think and write code, think like a programmer and write code, really becomes a liability. You've got to acquire this skill, and it's a skill that you'll acquire over your lifetime. In addition, it's becoming more and more an expectation when you publish science that you provide code that you use to conduct the analysis, as well as the data, so that anybody out there in the world could see how you did the analysis, could check your work, and be able to understand exactly what you're doing. Because the manuscripts you write, the things you see published, are usually lacking in important detail. And so having the code available will give consumers of your research information that they might need for how to interpret exactly what you've done or check on the specifics of your analyses that didn't show up in the paper itself. And again, it's also a kind of open science thing where you're making it available to the world what your thinking and your analysis was, so that others will be able to catch mistakes or understand all the nuances and subtle things about what you've done that maybe don't show up in the manuscript. And when you get good at writing code, then you can start writing what are called macros. And that means that you can get your software to do things that it ordinarily would not be able to do. That's kind of what R is like. R is really, the packages are kind of like macros, right? You have the base language, the base R language, and then these packages are basically add-on tools or macros that add new features or make certain things easier to do than they otherwise would be. And you can do this in SPSS as well. Much of my work and its popularity is due to the fact that I provide these macros to do analyses with software that people are already using. All right, so that's my sermon on why you need to go through this somewhat painful process at first, starting to learn to write in syntax and code. These are summarized. These reasons are summarized in the first few pages of a document called "Using SPSS: A Little Syntax Guide." I think that my list here captures most everything in that document. It does a lot more than this document includes way more than that, but it is all there in the first few pages to try to reinforce the point that you got to learn this, you got to know it. There's a lot of good reasons. But be patient and just practice.